Hello everybody and welcome back to Vehicles of War Thunder. In this episode we will be talking about the P40. However, we are not actually talking about the American aircraft, the P40, but rather the Italian Carro Armato P40, or as it is more formally referred to as the Carro Pesante P26/40. Under the Italian tank classification scheme, which differed from both the German and Allied tank classifications of the time, the P40 is actually classified as a heavy tank regardless of its operating weight. Only around 100 P40 tanks would be produced before the end of World War II, with many of them actually seeing service in the German army following Italy's surrender. But let us get into the actual history of how the tank was designed and how it came about. In 1938, armored troop regulations for the Italian army included a rule for heavy tanks, but the Italians would not actually begin development of such a tank until 1940. By December 1940, the first mock-ups of such a tank would be completed. That mock-up would be for a 26-ton heavy tank with a 75mm gun, 20mm cannon, a 330 horsepower engine, and 40mm of frontal armor. However, after 1940, development would actually slow down due to both technical challenges and changes in design requirements. The first issue would be largely caused by the Fiat Ansaldo duopoly not being capable of producing a diesel engine that was powerful enough, nor did they find it easy to convert an aviation gasoline engine for use in the tank. The first prototype of the tank was effectively just an upsized M11/39 with flat armor plates. However, in 1941, when Italian forces in Ukraine encountered the Soviet T-34, this knowledge would force a change in the hull design to incorporate sloped plates instead. The planned gun to install in the tank also changed from the 75/18 to the longer 75/32, but eventually it was settled on the Ansaldo 75/34, which had a higher muzzle velocity, which resulted in a lower trajectory and increased accuracy. The secondary armament also changed from a 20mm cannon to two 8mm Beretta machine guns in the hull barbette and another as a coaxial. The twin mount, however, would later be replaced by a single machine gun. The crew of the P40 consisted of 4 people, a driver and a hull machine gunner/radio operator located in the hull, and a commander/gunner and a loader located in the cramped, compared to German turrets, turret. The turret would also lack an intercom. There were 2 periscopes, one for the commander/gunner and one for the loader. A radio, a rear 2-piece hatch, and 2 slight slits on the rear side slopes. The armor for the P40 was riveted, with the turret consisting of 60mm of frontal plate, 50mm on the side, and 20mm on the top of the turret. In-game, it actually only has a 50mm plate. I'm not quite sure what the reason for that is. Again, all my sources claim that the turret is a 60mm frontal plate, but for whatever reason, Gaijin apparently decided to give it a 50mm frontal plate. I'm not quite sure what the reason for that is, and I find it somewhat unlikely that all of my sources are inaccurate. I mean, it's a possibility, I just don't think it's particularly likely. But continuing on, the hull armor of the P40 was 50mm on the front, 40mm on the sides and rear, and 14mm on the bottom of the engine deck. This armor configuration would be tested against the British QF 2-pounder, however, it would fail against the QF 6-pounder. In 1941, the first test would be conducted for a 420 horsepower petrol engine, which would have given the 26-ton tank a power-to-weight ratio of 16 horsepower per ton, but it would not be approved for use by the Army. In 1942, Fiat would successfully provide a reliable V12 SPA 342 diesel engine, which would be adopted for use in the P40. The V12 SPA 342 engine could provide 330 horsepower, resulting in the tank having a power-to-weight ratio of around about 12 horsepower per ton. The P40 has a maximum speed of 40 kilometers an hour on road and 25 kilometers off-road. It also has a maximum range of about 280 kilometers. I'm assuming that that is on road. My sources did not specify exactly. As for the tank's use in actual combat, it was originally intended to be used in an infantry support role, but due to design changes, the tank would instead be used in support of medium tanks. This new use case would have an armored battalion consist of one heavy tank company with three companies of medium tanks. Only 21 tanks were completed before the Italian surrender and the subsequent armistice, during which time the tank would serve in defending Rome. The Germans, however, in need of additional vehicles, would order that production continued and appropriate completed tanks to the Southern Tank Training Battalion, 10th and 15th Police Panzer Companies, and the 24th Waffen Mountain Division of the SS Kaltziager, which I can guarantee I mispronounced. The Southern Tank Training Battalion would train units to use captured Italian tanks and had 5 P-40s in their inventory. The 10th Police Panzer Company had served in Russia prior to their redeployment to northern Italy in late 1944 to engage in anti-partisan duties alongside the 15th Police Panzer Company. As for the 24th Waffen Mountain Division, they were formed in summer 1944 and were deployed to Trieste and Udine, which I again guarantee I mispronounced, along the Adriatic coast, and while retreating towards Austria in March 1945, lost several P-40s to Shermans of the British 6th Armored Division. About 100 P-40s would be used by the German military, of which around 40 did not have an engine, and would instead be used as static emplacements at defensive positions such as the Gustav and Gothic lines. Several variants of this vehicle were proposed, but none ever made it beyond a single prototype. The first of these was the Carro Armato P40 which would have replaced the short-barreled 75mm with a 90mm gun. No unit was ever produced. The P43 bis would have then replaced the engine with a 480 horsepower engine. Again, no units were ever produced because that was a variant of the P43 which never got made. A self-propelled artillery piece based off the hull of the P40 was also proposed, with a single unit being produced for testing in 1943. This SPG would have replaced the main gun with a 149mm Cannone da 149/40 Modello 35. The Italian army was, however, not impressed by this SPG. The single prototype produced would be captured by the Germans after the armistice, and they were not impressed either. Finally, during the invasion of Germany, American forces would capture the prototype and send it to Aberdeen Proving Ground for testing. It is now located at the U.S. Army Ordnance Training and Heritage Center at Fort Lee, Virginia. And now for how the tank actually performs in War Thunder. All in all, the simplest way to describe the P40 is that it is an okay medium tank. It sits at the same BR as the M4A1 at 3.3, at least in realistic battles. I believe it's the same BR in arcade battles as well. The stock round, however, on the P40 is not able to pen the frontal armor of the P41, or excuse me, of the M4A1. I don't know how I screwed up reading that initially. Unless at point-blank range, and even then, that is mostly limited to a handful of weak spots when using the stock ammo. Once you upgrade to heat, and this is just a general occurrence when you upgrade to heat with the P40, is that it is a much more capable tank. However, heat does come with some downsides. It's now capable of penetrating 100 millimeters of armor as opposed to the 79 at 10 meters at 0 degrees when using the stock shell. However, heat shells have a bit of a downside to them. Their post-pen damage is not nearly as good as an APCBC with explosive filler. So while you are now able to somewhat reliably penetrate the armor of a lot of the stuff you're going to fight, and you don't have to specifically aim for weak spots, and actually some weak spots now also open up for you that weren't previously available. For example, with the M4A1, you can now actually shoot a little bit above the tracks and potentially hit the ammo racks there, assuming that there's any ammo in those ammo racks. And actually, you know, that'll do some damage. Potentially even ammo rack the Sherman. But with the stock shell, that weak point does not exist at all, period, even at point blank range. Unless you hit it from the side, in which case it doesn't really matter. The side armor of a Sherman is actually very easy to pen with basically anything in game anyway, particularly around its BR in the first place. But yeah, the stock shell on the P40, not that great. The stock shell is also basically unable to pen a KV-1, and even then, the few areas where you actually are able to get possible penetrations are, according to the protection analysis option available in game, are yellow, meaning that penetration possibility is low. Thus, theoretically, you can pen, you're just very unlikely to actually do it, and it's not necessarily going to be consistent. So, again, with the stock shell, you're not going to do so hot. Again, against both the KV-1 and KV-2, things improve a little bit when you switch to using heat, but again, heat comes with its own downsides. So that's just one thing you're going to have to deal with. And those few weak spots that do exist that you can reliably pen with the stock shell in the case of going up against the KV-1 and KV-2, those are assuming you don't get Gaijin by volumetric shells, which are very real possibilities because that's basically the driver port. And, well, the driver port is got a bit of an angle going on it, on the case of the KV-1 and KV-2, so there's a half-decent chance that you will get Gaijin if you attempt to shoot there, with the stock shell in particular. I don't know what it is, but volumetric doesn't seem to particularly matter when you're using protection analysis, so it's not always the most accurate method of figuring out whether or not a shot is actually feasible or not. And that's just an issue with how Gaijin implemented that system, I guess. Or that feature, rather. The top speed, again, of the P40 is around about 40 kilometers an hour. I honestly don't think I generally hit that top speed unless I'm going downhill. The reverse speed on the P40 is also abysmal at only theoretically a max reverse speed of -5 kilometers an hour. Again, I don't think you generally hit that. So the P40 is not a very mobile tank. But it is actually, across the board, if you look at the pure stat cards, it's actually roughly in line with the medium tanks of many of the other countries in the game at around about its BR. To give some examples, the hull armor on the P40 is roughly in line with the hull armor of the M4A1, which again is at the 3.3 battle rating, the same as the P40. The overall armor profile, i.e. how the armor is across the board in both the turret and the hull, on the front, sides, rear, etc., is roughly in line with the German Panzers and Soviet T-34s. So again, pure stats-wise, looking at just the stat card, the P40 is roughly in line with that of other countries in terms of top speed, armor, everything. Its main issue is just that the stock shell's not that great, and things only get marginally better when you upgrade to using the heat shell. And again, that comes with its own downsides in that the post-pen damage is not quite as good as the stock shell, but at least you can reliably penetrate most of the things you face. Especially if you get unlucky and you're someone like me who seems to more often than not get up tiered. I think I got really lucky here with the footage you're seeing in the background where I didn't really get up tiered all that often, but often in War Thunder I seem to get up tiered more often than not, which significantly hampers sometimes my enjoyability or my abilities to enjoy the game. So the best way to describe the P40 is that it is an average tank. It has an average gun, minus the stock shell. It has average armor, and it has average mobility. Theoretically, average mobility. Again, I don't think I've ever generally hit the top speed of 40 kilometers an hour unless I was going down a hill. And, well, I don't know about you guys, but I don't count going down a hill as max speed, because any vehicle can achieve its max speed if you push it down a hill that's just the right angle and is long enough for you to reach the top speed. Hell, you can even exceed your top speed if you have a long enough hill to go down. But as a general rule of thumb, max speed, going downhill does not count. However, we did recently cover a Japanese vehicle. Admittedly, it was a Japanese reserve vehicle, but nonetheless, I will say this, and I sort of hinted at it in that video as well. Italian tanks, even though they are overall, outside of the ones that are given via sort of a Lend-Lease type program, a lot of their stuff is average. But in War Thunder, average can be good. Especially, again, when you're comparing against Japanese tanks, which in my opinion are not that great anyway. So, like I said, in all, the P40 is a remarkably average tank, which isn't really a bad thing. Sometimes vehicles in War Thunder can seem to be hot garbage. I'm looking at you, Japan, with your early tanks. I really think they are hot garbage. While otherwise, a vehicle may sometimes seem a tad bit overpowered at times. However, so as a result, it's always nice to be able to actually find a vehicle, in this case a tank, that is average. It can be really good in the right hands and still perform pretty decently in average hands. And I would consider myself an average, maybe even potentially slightly below average player in War Thunder. Admittedly, that's not saying much. If I recorded more of my War Thunder, you guys would probably see that I often get teammates that aren't that great in the first place. Admittedly, I also regularly make mistakes, but nonetheless, like I said, a lot of my teammates I think are not the greatest anyway. But sometimes I get really lucky. But nonetheless, when you're able to have a vehicle that is decent, it's got decent speed, decent armor, decent mobility, and is actually capable of performing its role, it's pretty good. I will say that the P40, and I'm sort of going to regurgitate what the wiki says for War Thunder for the P40, the P40 performs best likely at longer range engagements, where enemies are going to struggle to penetrate your armor. This is not a brawling tank, realistically. You also want to make regular use of cover. Again, your reverse speed isn't the greatest, but with a forward-mounted turret, you're kind of out of luck. You're not able to do something that you can sometimes do in other vehicles, where you just reverse out of cover, shoot the enemy, and go forward, taking advantage of your significantly faster forward momentum to move. That's not something that's feasible with the P40. But that's going to be it for this episode of Vehicles of War Thunder. I've yet to decide exactly on what vehicle I'll be covering next. I have a few scripts that are mostly completed, like I said in the last episode. I just need to play the vehicle a little bit, record some matches, and see how the vehicle performs in the game. Especially because for a lot of them, it's been quite a while since I played them, so things may have changed since way back when. And I have one that's basically already done. I just need to get the Battle Pass version. In this case, I'm talking about the M6A1, or specifically the M6A2E1 in the case of the Battle Pass, so that I can see how that version performs. I already know how the M6A1 performs, but I need to see how this variant performs so I can mess around. Also, some of you have probably noticed ages ago that I'm not using the regular default sight on this vehicle. Yeah, I've messed around a little bit recently with using custom sights, particularly actually trying to focus often on using historical sights. I don't do that with every vehicles because some vehicles have really, really crappy historical sites, while other ones have fairly decent ones, which I like using when available. But I don't always do it. So that'll be it for this video, for this episode. Like I said, I will see you all maybe in a couple of weeks to a month, depending on exactly how long it takes for me to be able to go ahead and pump out another episode. Because this one and the last one are probably going to be going up within a couple of weeks of each other. But yeah, I will see you all next time. I hope you enjoy these videos because they take quite a bit of effort actually to do. I gotta find a vehicle that I own in War Thunder, figure out how I want to break it up, because some vehicle lines are very long. I'm looking at the Shermans and the Panzer IIIs and the Panzer IVs, while other ones aren't that long. So sometimes I'll probably need to break up some things into multiple parts. So Shermans I'll probably break up into the 75 millimeter Shermans and the 76 Shermans, with variants of them being in whichever part is mostly relevant to them. But yeah, so sometimes I need to actually spend a little time figuring out how I want to even record the video before, or what vehicles I want to cover before I even get around to being able to actually research, write the script, record some footage to go in the background. But yeah, so I will see you all next time. Like I said, I don't know what vehicle I'll be covering next. We'll see. But until next time, reminder that I do have a Discord and a Patreon. I do highly recommend to join the Discord so you can stay updated on the channel. As for the Patreon, if you find yourself enjoying this video or this series or any of the other series that I upload on the channel, I do highly recommend that you join the Discord, or excuse me, you become a patron. It helps the channel out immensely. That allows me to be able to buy new games, to be able to upload footage of those games on the channel. In the case of War Thunder, it allows me to be able to afford buying Golden Eagles or vehicle packs and things like that, so that I can have access to some vehicles that I may not otherwise have access to. Particularly when the premium version is a significant deviation from the tech tree version, and thus I want to be able to talk about both. But yeah, so there is actually a premium version of this vehicle. It was part of some revenue sharing program that Gaijin did, which does not exist anymore, so we're just going to ignore that. But I will see you all next time. Until then, goodbye and farewell.